today, the title of the talk is what the Buddha taught. Volume?
Yeah.
It's a bit warm, so that's why the fan is full speed. Hello? Not clear?
No, it's
Huh? Still not clear, no? Battery high. There it is. Hello? Yeah. Thank you. So, today Buddha Purnima, very auspicious day, from a Buddhist point of view. And then I'm going to talk about what Buddha taught. So, the Buddha taught many teachings. Right? So, yeah. We cannot do all the teachings in the time we have, but at least we can summarize. Yeah? So that's, you can hear now? Yeah? So that's what we going to try to do, is to summarize. And before we actually start, it's also important to generate correct motivation. So the Buddha always said that it's extremely important to have the correct intention, because whatever we do in daily life is either physical, or verbal, or mental. How we act, either in a good way, or less a good way, or more benefit or less benefit, it depends a lot about intention. If you have a strong intention, then you can accomplish much more. So that's why there's a lot of emphasis on generate correct motivation. So also here today, especially in the Buddha, then before we start, try to generate this kind of similar motivation that you can think not only to become a better human being, change your mind, because the mind is changeable. You can achieve more happiness, you can share that experience with others, but also think in a way that maybe there's a more, more kind of stable form of happiness that we call nirvana. And so try to focus on that goal, maybe nirvana or enlightenment. Yeah? So try to generate great motivation for yourselves, just mentally try to generate that motivation. Then maybe we recite also a few prayers on page number 73, prayer book. So then imagine, if you recite prayers, also try to think about the meaning. It's not merely reciting things, right? It's not kind of a ritual by itself. You should reflect on the meaning. And then you can imagine, if you feel comfortable with visualizing Sakyamuni Buddha in front, and then surrounding yourself, you can imagine all sentient beings of the different realms, the human aspect, where they are undergoing different types of suffering. And for their purpose, in order to liberate them from their suffering, for their purpose you lead them in the prayer. So you can imagine that. To the founder, the transcendent destroyer, the one going beyond, who destroy the complete perfect full awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata in all the worlds, being guided in means to protect. Teacher of gods and human beings, to you the complete fully awakened one, the now transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, subdue the psychic and prostrate may God be forever. To the founder, the transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, destroy. The complete, perfect, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, God in all the worlds, being guided in means to protect. Teacher of gods and human beings, to you the complete, fully awakened one, the now transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, subdue from the psychic and prostrate may God be forever. To the founder and transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the destroyer, the complete, perfect, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, God in all the worlds, being guided in means to protect. Teacher of gods and human beings, to you the complete, fully awakened one, the now transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subdue from the psychic and prostrate may God be forever. When O supreme among humans, you were born in this earth, you played out in the skies, and then announced supreme in this world. To you, O wise and prostrate, with pure bodies, forms of being and pure wisdom, ocean like a bottom mountain. Flame that blazes in the three worlds, wind of the best, thought to be prostrate. With spring signs, face like spotless moon, godlike gold to your prostrate. Thus free to well done, not incomparable wise one to your prostrate. Saved have a great confession to found there in all understanding. The field of mirrors, who call it is like a vast ocean. You, the one bound to dust and thy prostrate. The purity that frees from attachment, the virtue that frees from the low rounds, the one part sublime pure reality, the downward testifies and prostrate. Those who are liberated showed also the path to liberation. The holy field qualified the realizations who are devoted with more precepts, to you sublime community that the virtue and prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma, reference to the Supreme Son. To all three have devoted homage, to all worldly respects, bowing your bodies, as many as all realms, aspects, with supreme faith that pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a respiration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of a dew or a bubble. A dream of less of lightning clouds, sequence and things as such. To these merits may all sentient beings attain the rank of seeing some beautiful faults and be delivered from the symbol, bird and the range of agency. I prostrate Arya triple gem, thus I heard in one tongue, the above one was dwelling in the master of this mountain. It was here together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the above one was absorbed in concentration and was addressed from a profound perfection. Also at that time, the above one Mahasattva āryasatyāni looked upon the very practice of profound perfection of wisdom and beheld the spirit echoes of infinite nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva āryasatyāni, how should any son of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? He said, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva āryasatyāni said to the Venerable Shariputra, any son of the lineage or lord of the lineage who wishes to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeating those building those five actors also empty in nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not all their form, and form is also not their emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, conditional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra likewise all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics. Unproduced, unseen states, not without statement, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no constituent factors, and no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible forms, no sound, no order, no taste, no object, no touch, and no phenomenon. There is no element up to and including no mind element, no mental conscious element. There is no ignorance and no distinction of ignorance up to and including no extinction of aging or death. Similar, there is no suffering, no origination, no cessation and parts. There is no itself wisdom, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration, without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of the nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in 3 times must manifest the complete awakening, survive perfectly complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the mantra, the mantra of the mantra that really pacifies all suffering through the knowledge of true sense of force. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata, Gata Gata, Paragata, Pada Samgata, what is all about. Shariputra, Bodhisattva Master, should train the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan words from concentration, and the Bodhisattva Master, āryasatyāni saying, well said, son of the lineage, is like that. It is like that one should practice profound perfection of wisdom just as we communicate to live ourselves in choice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Master, āryasatyāni, and those surrounding in there entirely, along with the worlds of gods, the humans, as catvāris, overjoyed, and embraced. I was straight to the gathering of the keys of the 3 chakras, who abide in holy yoga in space. By the power of your clear voice and imaginary combinations, you convert their minds. āryasatyāni. By the teaching of the 3 sublime jewels possessing the power of truth, may the in and out be transformed, may the be spells, may the be testified according so. May the negative forces opposed by the Dhamma be testified, may the host of 80,000 obstacles be testified, and may the separate problems and harmful conditions to the Dhamma and all the enjoyment of the Dhamma. May there be a spaciousness and perfect happiness even and right now. Go through page number 93, yep, 93. The foundation of all qualities is the guide of the Guru. Rightly devoted to him is root of the thoughts, and by clearly seeing this and applying great effort. Please bless me, rely upon him in great respects. Understanding that precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, it's very meaningful again. Please bless me to generate a mind that once sees a day and night takes its existence. This life is impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. Just after that, just like a shadow falls the body, the reason of black and white comes forward. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtue deeds. Seeking some side values is load all suffering, they are uncertain, cannot be relied upon. Recognize these shortcomings, please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thoughts, mindfulness, alertness, and great fortune arise. The root of the teaching is speaking impression of others. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen in the sea of samsara, so all modern migratory beings. Please bless me to see this and train this free bodhicitta and bear responsibility of free migratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta, but do not practice 3 types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice Vaisakha, powers of great energy. Once I have specified destruction to wrong objects and correctly analyze the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly with my mind stream the unified thought of calm and light and special density. Having become a vessel by training in the jet on thought, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortune path of unified people. At a time, the basis of accomplishing 2 attainments is keeping pure vows and samadhi. As I become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to effect these vows of actualized my heart. Then, having realized in order to 2 stages the essence of āryasatyāni, by practicing with great energy never given up before sessions, please bless me to realize the issue of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the Guru's children noble hearts and the spiritual friends have long lives. And bless me to best practice with the art and unities. And all my lives never separated from the Gurus. May joining magnificent Dharma, between the states and paths, make the Guru to the state of catvāri. Short mandala, yeah, page 98. So, what the Buddha taught. We just read one verse actually, which actually summarizes more or less the teaching of the Buddha. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. Because the topic of today is what the Buddha taught. Yeah, so the Buddha was a kind of scientist of the mind, so to say. Yeah? So the Buddha examined the mind, and in a sense, to accomplish different purposes in life. Yeah? So, what is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to achieve happiness and to eliminate suffering, right? So, yeah, do you agree? So, in order to accomplish those 2 aims in life, there are many possibilities. Right? But are those possibilities that are available really accomplishing happiness or not? That's the question. So most people know to a certain extent that ordinary life, the things we have in ordinary life, is not really giving 100% satisfaction. Right? If you have a good education, good job, or maybe not a good education, not a good job, whatever you do in daily life, there's not real 100% satisfaction. Yeah? So it's always looking for more. Yeah? So it's never really the real happiness is being gained. So, and most people in this world, they don't have a clue what's going on in their life. So luckily, you being here with a particular purpose, you came with a particular intention, and you thought about things in life. So that's very, very fortunate. You know, most people, they don't have a clue what's going on, and they just are in the nature of suffering without really realizing it. So they don't really realize. So some people, they start to understand that they are suffering, but they don't know how to deal with it. So that's another step we have to towards too. So I was in Dharamsala just yesterday, came back. And, yeah, so I was teaching some retreat, and I had to help with the course and translation work. So then one day, sometimes you have days that things don't really go the way you want things to go, right? You know the feeling? So then that happened to me one day in Dharamsala, and then I was tired, and I just want to go home and just relax, stay by myself, kind of thing. So then I went back in the, the bazaar, and I was very busy with tourists. So then two people from Chandika, two professional people, they came up to me and said, we want to talk to you. I said, okay. They tried many people, but they didn't find the right person. And they were so depressed. They had so many problems. So I thought, okay, let's go for tea. So then we went for tea, and I thought, okay, spend maybe 10, 15 minutes with them, that's it. But it took more than 2 hours. But at least there was some benefit, because they were a lot of mental suffering. So after 2 hours, at least I could produce a smile on the face. So yeah, it took some time. But then you can see, most people in this world, they have these problems, but they don't know how to deal with it. And then the mind is just going in that same kind of circle again and again and again, without getting the possibility to get out of it. So that's something, the start of our understanding of the problem, or the start of understanding of what we call suffering. So that's why the Buddha said the first step in the spiritual path is recognition of the problem, or recognition that we're suffering. So that's a very important point, because if you don't understand your suffering, you will never look for a means to get out of suffering. So that's one aspect. Then another aspect of India is a more kind of spiritual place, country. In the West, or you talk with Westerners, then so there's also that. Yeah. If you talk with Westerners, then some of the Westerners, they think, oh, those Buddhists, they must be so depressed, because they always talk about suffering, permanence, death. But actually, I think it's the opposite. Because if you understand reality, then things are much more acceptable. People would always push reality away. When they meet reality, there's suffering, mental suffering. So that's why we Buddhists, we talk about a problem like suffering in order to understand that we generate a wish to be free of it. Same way, if you have sickness, you analyze the sickness, you go to the doctor, see if it's possible to get cured, and then you depend on medication, right? Yeah, so here's the thing. You analyze the problem of suffering, and then look at the cause of suffering, and then look for means, or the possibility, first of all, if it's possible to get rid of suffering, and then how do we do it? So that's in a very short summary what we're going to talk about today. That's the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha. Yeah? So the first truth, the Buddha taught the truth of suffering, to let us recognize that it's not perfect. So if you have an addiction, for example, then also if you don't recognize the faults of the addiction, it's very difficult to get rid of that problem.
So here, same thing. So we analyze suffering. So there's different aspects to its suffering. So we have suffering of suffering, like sickness or headache or depression. Yeah, that's very easy to recognize. Yeah, even a dog on the street knows that aspect. When it's hungry, it eats. This is suffering of suffering. Then there's also the suffering of change. Yeah, so when it's this kind of weather, yeah, here is in Dharamsala is a bit better example. You know Dharamsala, the mountains. So then, if it's too cold, we're going to stay in the sun. But then the sun is getting too hot, they go in shade again. You see, there's not really satisfaction. Yeah? So that's with everything in life. You think, oh, if I have this new iPhone, or this new laptop, or this car, or this holiday, or this meal, I will be happy. Okay? So the question is if that's true or not. So I've had some friends from the Netherlands who worked, had some money, and then they went for a world trip. It was very interesting. They went to different countries. Because in one place you get bored, and then the mind is not happy, so they go somewhere else. And then you go somewhere else, and there's new distractions, you know, so the mind is distracted from actually really understanding what's going on inside. It's just a distraction, right? So then it looks like happiness. So sometimes it looks like a distraction is cause for happiness, but actually it's not. It's just a temporary misunderstanding of reality that gets you rid of some problems. I mean, rid of a problem to the extent you don't have to think about it because you're so distracted. So some people also watch a movie or something as relaxation, but actually watching a movie as relaxation is not really helping. Because this distraction is not really a tool to eliminate suffering. So this couple went to different places and actually they found out that wherever they go, after some time, they get bored and the mind is unhappy. Until one day they met kind of a spiritual part. Buddhism, and they thought, oh, actually wherever you are, if you understand the mind, then there's more possibility for happiness. Because happiness by itself is a feeling, right? So what is the most superior form of feeling is mental. So if you have a physical problem, but mentally you're very strong, there's less suffering. If you have a physical problem and mentally we're weak, then there's more suffering created. Yeah, we create so much suffering in our mind. Same with these two friends I met in Dharamsala. Of course, everybody has problems, but we have a problem, we think it's the biggest one. Nobody else has a problem as I have. Right? I'm suffering so much. Nobody else suffers like that. You know? So actually that's also not true. Because we start to understand other people. Sometimes we meet people on the street or in public transport or wherever. You meet people, then, or on TV, you know. Famous people in the movies, chairs. So it looks from the outside, it looks like the person is happy. But then when you start talking with the person, you actually start to find out that also they have problems. So that's even more true for people who look on the TV screen. They look like they're really glamorous and everything. Yeah. But when you meet them in person, suffering. Once I flew also from Dharamsala to Delhi, and then two famous people. One lady, I think she was a movie star, she had bodyguards with her and everything. And when we touched down in Delhi, it's a very small aircraft, so she was sitting in the front, but there's no business class transfer. She went out and all the crew staff made photographs, right? So I didn't know because I don't watch Hollywood movies, so I didn't know who she was. She did look very happy. That I know. Because she had black sunglasses and then the face didn't look very happy. Then on the same day, as soon as Dalai Lama arrived in Dharamshala, and he's also quite famous. Right? So he comes out of the plane and sees a few people on the ground floor. Totally different approach, you know. Very interesting. So So that means that if you're famous by itself or have wealth, that is not a cause for happiness. It's our mental attitude. So then, what is a cause for happiness? Is an absence of suffering. If our mind is disturbed by afflictions, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, our mind gets really disturbed. That's the nature of a destructive emotion, is to disturb the mind. You lose the peace of mind. So if you don't have those afflictions, there's no peace of mind. So the absence of the cause of suffering is happiness, basically. And the absence or the lack or the non-existence of any type of suffering, and even more true, the cause of suffering being the affliction, that's the real form of happiness. So that's what we're going to talk about. And so first, the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. Yeah? So there's different aspects. There's an aspect of impermanence, yeah? An aspect of suffering, yeah? An aspect of selfless or empty. So what it comes down to, generally speaking, the real suffering we just talked about. I didn't finish that one actually. We talked about the suffering of suffering. Remember, a cold or a headache, yeah? Or hunger, and we talked about the change of suffering. In Dharamsala, the weather, or here maybe the same thing. You go in your room, you put on the AC, or the AC, you put it too strong, and then it gets cold, you get chill, and then you have to put down again. So that's a changeable suffering. Or I always use the example of the Punjabi dinner, that heavy Punjabi dinner. You're very hungry, and in the evening you want to have a nice meal, so you take a heavy Punjabi dinner, and then the next morning you wake up with a stomachache and extremely dull. So that's the suffering of change. Initially it looks like that meal is going to give you happiness, but actually it's not. So that's the suffering of change. Then the third one is, those two are easy to understand, right? We can relate to it. Sometimes we don't really listen to that understanding, but yeah, we can relate. So then the third one is more difficult to be understood, but a much more important one. So when the Buddha said you should know suffering, first truth, you should abandon the cause of suffering. You should manifest the true cessation, and you should meditate on the paths. That's how the Buddha explained all the truths. First he said, this is suffering, and then he touched the contaminated aggregates, right? And then he said you should know suffering. So knowing suffering refers to knowing this third one, the all-pervasive, compounding form of suffering. It's kind of a whole sentence. Yeah. So all-pervasive means it pervades everywhere, from the tip of your toe to the crown of your head. At the moment you're quite comfortable. Yeah. No? But when the fan goes off, or you sit for some time, you get an ache somewhere in the body. Yeah, you move around, and then you stand up, and then you ache again. So there's always suffering on the surface. There's always a possibility to get a headache, there's always a possibility to get a cold or a fever, or meeting a problem you don't like, you don't know how to deal with it. Always underneath the surface, the potential is always present. It just has to meet the conditions. So if there's external conditions, but no inner cause, it will not happen. Right? So we talk about law of causality. So, for example, at the moment most of us don't have cold or a fever, but now if all of a sudden starts a storm building up with some rain and a cold wind, it's possible to get cold, just like that. And that's an external condition, but also we have an internal cause. Right? Always underneath the surface there's always a possibility to get sick. Or you go to a restaurant and the food is maybe old, you get food poisoning. It's very easy. Why? Because of these contaminated aggregates. So underneath the surface there's always a possibility to experience suffering. And so there's an all-pervasive compounding form of suffering of these contaminated aggregates. Yeah? So that's also true in the whole cycle of rebirth, or the wheel of life. Yeah? So who doesn't believe in reincarnation? Who does not believe in reincarnation? I can drink some tea now. That's always my reason to drink tea. Ask a question, then have some time to answer. So, who doesn't believe? Everybody believes in reincarnation? You think? Yeah. So, in the Buddhist, but also if you believe in reincarnation, you also have to know why. Also very important. Yeah. So, this center is not made to make people Buddhists. That's not our job. Our job is to help achieve more happiness. And then the more stable form of happiness people can gain, the better. So then we talk about spiritual path, enlightenment. So there's different aspects of Buddhism. We have secular aspects, like mind science, philosophy of dependent origination, quantum mechanics. So there's a lot of relationships we can build between Buddhist mind science and psychology, or philosophy of the ultimate nature of reality and the law of quantum physics, or dependent origination. Anyway, there's not enough time today to go on all the details, but the Buddhist principle accepts the law of reincarnation because of the consciousness being there since the beginner's lifetime. Consciousness is something else than matter. Consciousness is not a brain. Consciousness is another entity. According to modern neuroscience, certain neuroscientists, they understand that there should be something else than the physical brain, what we call consciousness. But how the correlation is between the two is still a very new field of research, because consciousness is not matter. So according to the present scientific findings, it cannot really be examined because it's kind of subjective kind of experience, right? So, yeah, but yeah, there are a lot of scientific research being done between correlation between mental states and brain activity. So that's the first step. There is a consciousness which is not the brain. So that's, for us Buddhists, very interesting. Or even if not Buddhist, it can be very interesting that this consciousness also comes about by causes and conditions. Right? And consciousness can only be produced by consciousness itself. So based on that logic, we cannot find the beginning of consciousness. Then of course there's also all the fields, you can try to think of the fields of, does consciousness really need the brain? Are there types of consciousness that can exist without the brain? So there are different types of phenomena of hydrocephalus, for example, which are only 5% brain tissue, but the person can still function normally. That's one aspect. Or a near-death experience, another example of consciousness that can perceive things that can be validated without brain activity, because within 10 to 20 seconds of cardiac arrest, the flow of oxygen to the brain stops. So that's being researched. So there are states of consciousness with less depending, or maybe not depending upon the brain. So those types of consciousness can be proven according to science. And in our tradition, Tibetan tradition, there is also masters who use what they call the clear mind of death. The states of mind after the person is clinically dead, a very subtle mind dawns. I've seen a few cases of, like in this climate, if the body doesn't decay after a person is being considered dead within a few days, or a week, or 2 weeks, or 20 days, that is, the doctors come and they say, oh, I cannot explain this. Because there's no decay of the body, there's no smell, there's a very pleasant atmosphere. Very interesting. So there are types of consciousness without dependence on the brain. So then there is a research of Stevenson, I mentioned many times, children remember 5 times, correlated with bird marks of the cause of death, very scientific, because I studied hydrology when I was young, and there's a lot of mathematics and statistics involved in hydrology. So if you put those things into Stevenson's research, it's not random. The children remember previous lifetimes can be validated, and also the bird marks, the cause of death of the previous identity. So Stevenson says, I don't like to prove reincarnation, but there is something that carries information from a previous personality to the present. So that, what the Buddhists we call the stream of consciousness. So that stream of consciousness is there since the beginning of lifetime. So then these things when we talk about now make so much more sense. Because the suffering we have in this life is peanuts compared to the suffering we have since the beginning of this lifetime. So then the whole cycle, the wheel of life starts to give much more meaning. So then this all-pervasive compounding form of suffering we just talked about, from the tip of your toe to the crown of your head, there's always only need the surface. You can always get sick. You can always have a mental problem. It just has to be triggered by a few external conditions. So that's also true in the whole cycle of rebirths. Wherever you are within samsara, there's no happiness. There's no ultimate form of happiness. Whatever. It's just like drinking salty water. If you're thirsty, you keep drinking. There's no end. There's no satisfaction. Like the Rolling Stones, where there's some, I can get no satisfaction. It's true. It's because if you don't really understand the real cause of happiness, then it's very difficult to get satisfied with life. So that's this all-pervasive compounding form of suffering, which is there since the beginning of lifetime. So that's what we talk about, the true suffering, the first noble truth. Then the second noble truth is the true cause of suffering. So what is the cause of suffering? So we can see that afflictions like anger, jealousy, pride, attachment, aversion, those kind of things disturbs our mind, right? And not only disturbs our mind, but also it can cause a negative act, physically or verbally. Criminals, for example, they have a kind of emotional hijack. They're overpowered by an affliction, they do something wrong, and later on they regret it. So we have one of our friends in prison, same thing, he's there for murder, a very nice person. But he said, for 10-15 minutes, I was not in control, I made a mistake. Right? So that causing problem in society was caused by mental attitude. Anger, killing a person, outright. So it all basically comes down to the mind. So whatever activity we do. So then the cause of suffering is also mainly comes from the mind. And then reflects in physical and verbal activity, and then negative deeds are being created and causes suffering. So then we have to examine the mind, and well in the sense of what actually are these causes of suffering? What are those afflictions? Anger, jealousy, pride. It's not easy to recognize that it strips the mind, right? And that how it actually reflects and how we actually get motivated in a physical, verbal way. So actually you can see that these afflictions or destructive emotions are a cause of suffering. It's not only a Buddhist finding, also in modern psychology. If you read the books of Daniel Goleman, the movement of emotional intelligence, for example, very popular in the West. And why is it popular? Because it works. People who are more emotionally intelligent in life, they're much more successful, much more happier, and much more better in relationships, and better managers. People who are very emotionally intelligent, they're very good managers. Very interesting. So that training of the mind helps us how to relate to other people. If you know how to relate to other people, it's very difficult to do things together. So this movement of emotional intelligence is very similar to what we talk about in Buddhism. By subduing your mind, there's happiness. So if you read those books of Daniel Goleman, for example, or those books related with emotional intelligence, the final conclusion is, if you subdue your mind, there's happiness for self and others. Very interesting. Why? Because if you counteract afflictions like anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, then the mind becomes much more peaceful. And you know how to talk in a much better way. So the problem is with a criminal, a person who commits a crime, there's no understanding of what's going on in their own mind. Because they don't understand their own mind, they don't know the feeling of somebody else. So that's why they act in a particular way. And the same thing is true when an affliction comes up very strongly. If you get angry at a person very intensely, We don't think properly. The mind capacity of analyzing is gone. So that's an aspect of the afflictions. So we have also positive or constructive emotions we have to develop. So those positive or constructive emotions, the mind has much more clarity. For example, compassion, love and kindness. If it's a real genuine form of love and kindness and compassion, it is separated from attachment. So you think about all sentient beings, not only your friends, that kind of compassion or love and kindness, the mind is very clear. You can see the constructive emotions, or patience, for example. The mind that is totally in control. It's much more clarity, much more possibility to analyze things, make the right decision. So that's what we try to enhance, is those constructive emotions and to eliminate the destructive emotions. So how do we do that? By contemplating the faults of the afflictions and the benefits of their antidotes. And then slowly think about it again and again, we can change the mind. So that's basically what we talk about the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. But what is the root cause? We always try to ask more questions. It's very important to examine. What I say here also, don't think, oh, this monk studied for so many years, he probably knows it all, and it's probably all true. Don't think like that. Examine what I say, don't accept. Also the Buddha said, don't accept what I'm saying, examine. So, what is the root cause of the suffering? Is there something that creates anger, attachment, jealousy, pride to rise? This question. So, there is something, what we call ignorance, a concrete concept of I am me, ignorantly appearance of a self. So that causes affliction to arise. How can you prove that? Because if I say to you now, I will use the example, it's not my example, it's actually an example by Daniel Brown from Harvard Medical School. He did a lot of research regarding self-cherishing attitude and self-centeredness and how that actually causes suffering of depression, low self-esteem, high blood pressure, and heart problems. Very interesting. That, even scientists, they use similar techniques as in science. They come to very similar conclusions. So then, also in this research, it's like if you ask the people, please get angry. Go on, get angry. It's not easy, right? But then they tell you, oh, you look like this, you look like that. You know, then it's very easy. How dare this person say this to me? Me, I. You know? So then it's very easy to get angry. Because he built up this concrete I, and based on that concrete I, there's a kind of self-importance or self-cherishing attitude that comes up. And that's a very essential point to be understood. Because if you really like to have a stable form of happiness and eliminate all suffering, then you have to recognize this ignorance. Because it's called ignorance. Why? Because it's not in accordance with reality. Yeah? Why is it not according to reality? Because our body and mind are momentarily changing, isn't it? They depend on cause and conditions. There's no place for something to exist all by itself, concrete, inherently, without dependence on cause and conditions. Though it appears like that. It appears in that way, but whatever appears is not always reality. Right? For example, a dream. If you're in a dream, a bit uncomfortable dream, then you wake up in the morning, and your mind is still a little bit, not as it used to be before going to sleep. Then you go to the bathroom or something, wash your face, and have some water, and then go back to bed and try to forget the dream. But it's still going on a little bit. Because of habituation of a very intense kind of feeling. So at the time of the dream, you believed it was reality, right? But actually it was not. No? You know the feeling? Or in the waking state, if you worry about the person dear to you, oh, something happened. You know the feeling? Then you always believe that actually something happened. But it's not true. You know? So those states of mind, we believe is reality, but it's not. So what appears to our mind is not always reality. Same here. this concrete concept of I that arises is not reality. Actually, it's very funny because this concrete I, or inherently existing, doesn't exist, but it looks like it exists inherently, is cause for all the problems, and actually doesn't exist. Very interesting. But because of our habituation, for a very long time, we believe in it. Same with the dream. If you have this dream and you wake up and the mind is still going, because of the habituation, you still believe it to a certain extent. You saw a spirit or something, and then you wake, but still you're a bit afraid. So, because of the habituation. So with ignorance, the habituation is there since beginner's lifetime. Because we never counteracted that kind of misunderstanding. So that's why sentient beings are suffering since beginner's lifetime. So now here, being here in the center, we talk about it, it's very fortunate. Why is it very fortunate? Because now we actually start to see what causes the problems. And not only see, but also see actually doesn't exist. If you, Arya Deva in his 400 verse, he said, if you even doubt, if you think the self maybe exists concrete, or maybe doesn't exist concrete, probably it doesn't exist concrete. That doubt, that's shaking samsara. You know? So that's we have to generate. At least that doubt we have to generate today, okay? Not if we cannot understand emptiness, but at least try to generate doubt. Because we grasp to this concrete concept of I. This is beginning of lifetime. Yeah? And based on these building blocks, everything becomes very concrete. Our problems, they look out there as huge, as mountains. They cannot be changed. You know, if we go in this circle, our mind goes in a circle, and we have a problem or depression. You know, so it goes around and round and round, and then it looks all so true, and it looks all so big, and it looks also concrete. Sometimes it can happen. You get out of it, and you look back, and you laugh at it. Because how could I be so stupid to stay in that state? It actually was only cause for suffering. I was not constructive. So the same here with ignorance. It's there since beginner's lifetime, and we always occupied by it. And being occupied by it, we never look for means to destroy it, cut it down. So that's why we're here today. Yeah? So first we have to recognize how it appears. So we talk about here the cause, the real cause of suffering. So when you get angry at a person, or when a person scolds you, or a person criticizes you, you know the feeling? So next time that happens, don't fight back. Just think, precious. This person is so kind. Because without understanding ignorance, you cannot eliminate suffering. And this person is helping you to understand ignorance. It's very, very kind, very precious. You know? So a person who actually scolds you or criticizes you, that person is actually a real guru. Right? And if you act in a more peaceful way, also there's benefit for the person as well. I always use the example of the street dogs when they protect a particular territory. Right? So another dog from our territory comes inside, there's fighting and barking and back and forth, right? You see, right? So in the Netherlands there's no street dogs, so you don't see that. But here you see that. So then sometimes it happens, a dog from a little bit more peaceful nature comes. And he comes in that area and all the dogs bite. Not biting yet, but barking and trying to attack. And this dog just wigs it still and likes to play. Right? What happens then? All energy transforms. The dogs who want to fight, they don't know how to deal with it for a few seconds, and then, oh, maybe play, and then they play. The whole fighting disappears. You see that? And the dog's consciousness is a very similar one when it comes to actually, of course, the humans have more human intelligence, etc. But from the point of view of afflictions, very, very similar. For the same thing, no? People scold us, then we react. Then it blows up. The person who scolds us and we keep our peace of mind, that person doesn't feel the the kind of wall against him, right? So then the person for a few seconds doesn't know how to deal with it, and maybe it changes. Right? Yeah. So then, when a person scolds you or criticizes you or talks about your mistakes, then try to put it into practice, because you can see straight away, how did this person say this to me? I. And then it appears very, very clearly. The concrete I appears at the time. That's a very precious moment, because if you recognize that, how it appears, and then analyze if it exists the way it appears, then we're really on the part. Because on the part in a sense, not on the actual part, but we start our practice to eliminate suffering. Because how it appears, very concrete. It's like a brick or a stone sometimes, and that will be hard. You know. And then you analyze. Oh, if it exists the way it appears, it should be either in my body or mind, right? There's no other opportunity, possibility. So you look for the tip of your toes all the way up. You scan your body, you know, all the different bones and the different muscles, and the organs, you know, brain, skull, the fingers, and the hand. Actually, within the body, you cannot find something that exists from its own side. Because your whole body is just functioning based on causes and conditions, right? Yeah. So it cannot exist in the body. Does it exist in the mind? That's the next question. So then you analyze your mind from the morning when you wake up until you fall asleep. It's just a flow of all kind of thoughts based on the different conditions or the things that trigger those thoughts from outside. Yeah, so in that way, you actually see that within consciousness, and we have different types of consciousness, right? We see things, we hear things, we smell things, we taste things, we feel things, we think about things, mental consciousness. So in that way, among the different types of consciousness and the flow of consciousness of the different thoughts or the different perceptions, there's no place for something to exist all by itself. So also within consciousness, there's no I to be found. See that? You can follow that a little bit or? Little bit? Because mostly when I talk about emptiness, the people fall asleep. Now it's quite okay, even with the heat. Because mostly emptiness, why do people fall asleep or walk away? Because emptiness is the antidote to all suffering. And emptiness is the antidote to ignorance. And because of the habituation to ignorance since beginner's lifetime, it's very difficult to be understood. And there's all kinds of obstacles. Falling asleep, or losing interest, go away. So it happens sometimes. But you're very fortunate that you have some interest in this, because this is going to really help you to solve problems. It's only Dalai Lama, when he actually was teaching the 400 verse of āryasatyāni quite some years ago, he talked about his own experience of emptiness a little bit. He doesn't do that very often. And then he said, if you meditate on this emptiness or this lack of concreteness, right? That's what we talk about. Emptiness means empty of something. Yeah, so this room is empty of an elephant, right? There's no elephant in the room. Yeah, so that means it's empty of an elephant. And so when we talk about emptiness in this context, is empty of inherent existence, empty of concrete existence, empty of intrinsic existence, empty of something that exists without dependent causes and conditions, or without dependence. That doesn't exist, right? Everything is in the nature of dependent origination. Right? So that's why we say emptiness. So then when one is talking about emptiness, he said if you meditate on emptiness or reflect upon emptiness, so I think it's 60 times a day or something, he's referring to, then actually it looks like, it's only said, affliction don't arise. Right? Why? Because if you don't have this concrete concept of the table is out there, and this person is out there, and this person is like this, and I'm like this, and that I is like this, it's not very easy to get very emotional and to get, these afflictions come up. If you don't have that concrete concept of reality, and you see everything in nature of dependent origination, then these kind of afflictions don't arise. So that's the very Buddhist principle is, if you understand reality, there's less suffering. Right? So there's also true the reality of death and impermanence. If you don't understand death and impermanence, or don't like to hear about it, then when it happens, it's very difficult. Yeah? As soon as we're born, we're gonna die. That's a given. There's not something magical or something like that. As soon as you're born, you're gonna die. And to die is nothing special because you did it so many times. So there's nothing to be afraid of. Right? So if you understand death and impermanence, there's less suffering. Because people want to die anyway. So better be prepared. Right? Not in a sense of, getting very, very emotional and just understand reality. Yeah? I would use the example of my old mother. My father passed away, cancer, and very quick, within a few months. It's she. Because her son was walking around like this. So she thought he's walking around like that because there's a reason. That's why she started reading books about, life, books about his holiness and death and impermanence. So she started thinking about these things. My father passed away. My uncles and aunts thought, my mother goes in depression for months. It didn't happen. Of course, sadness was there, but she could deal with it very, very well because she was thinking about death and impermanence. So that's very important. So the more you understand reality, less problems. And that's also here true for the reality, even more true of ultimate reality of how things actually exist. That this ignorance doesn't exist. It's grasping at a concrete I am me. Because there's no place, as we just saw, within the body, within the mind, there's no place for something to exist all by itself without causal conditions or without dependence. You see that? So this teaching on dependent origination is so precious. So that's why Nagarjuna, for example, in his fundamental wisdom, he praises the Buddhist teaching, mainly the teaching on dependent origination. Why? Because by the power of dependent origination, you prove ignorance doesn't exist. The ignorance of grasping at a concrete I am me. Right? If you prove that the ignorance of a concrete I am me doesn't exist, you actually cause, you actually create the cause of suffering to be taken away. If you take away ignorance, there's no affliction. If there's no concrete building blocks for anger, attachment, jealousy, pride to arise, there's no affliction. If there's no affliction, there's no suffering. There's no disturbance of mind. There's no negative physical or verbal act. If there's no anger, so by understanding this ignorance and understanding it doesn't exist the way it appears, by the power of that, you actually eliminate suffering. So there's a second noble truth, the true cause of suffering. So that's the ignorance. So then the third noble truth is the true cessation, or the absence of suffering. So if you understand emptiness more and more, you will also see the possibility to be free of suffering. If you see that ignorance is the cause of suffering, and you see ignorance is not a voluntary reality, and with a correct state of mind, you can eliminate ignorance. So all our wrong forms of conception, we can take away. Right? Same with the dream example. So if you dream about something, and then you wake up, you wash your face, and very disturbing dream, and you drink something, then you reason. Oh, it's just a dream, it's just a dream, it was not a spirit, it's just a dream. Then by the power of that reasoning, which is valid, you take away this misconception of the fear. So fear is mostly also based on incorrect understanding of reality. So here, same thing, with the correct understanding of reality and reasoning, you reason that ignorance doesn't exist the way it appears. We just saw that whatever appears is not reality, so now we use reasoning. So the Buddhist teaching is very complex, And there's so many things that can be done. Practices, prayers, you know. Those things are also important, but the main emphasis should be on what we talk about here. Analyzing in a proper way. Mind is peace, calm. Meditate. That's what we call meditation. Meditation doesn't mean just sit somewhere and try to think about nothing. It isn't meditation. Hey, a lot of people have misunderstanding what meditation is all about. Of course, it brings some peace of mind to sit somewhere and breathe and be, try to get rid of your thoughts and those kind of things. That brings temporary happiness. But it's not going to solve the problem. When I was young, when I was in university, I was very lucky because on the bicycle, everybody is on the bike in the Netherlands because everything is flat. So, yeah, anyway, Bangalore you don't see that many people on the bicycle. So, we're very close to the university and also close to the forest. So we used to do a lot of sports, especially martial arts. We were kind of freaks at the time in the sports. So we were like training. And then I got a little bit more and more interested in the philosophy behind martial arts. So I went from hardcore taekwondo to kung fu, then to tai chi and qigong. So it's a little bit like, instead of getting all blue from the taekwondo, it went a bit more softer and then the small movements of the tai chi. So then, because of that, I started thinking about it, and then also one day I thought, I'm going to meditate in the forest. So I was sitting there on the tree, but actually I didn't know how to meditate. So I just wasting my time, basically. So meditation means to habituate your mind to something positive. Yeah? So here, the most positive thing when we talk about is to eliminate these afflictions, right? It's those positive states of mind we talk about. So that's meditation. So in order to come to that, we need a certain kind of concentration of the mind. So that's why we sometimes do the breathing, counting of the breath. So you have to develop a kind of concentration. Without concentration, it's very difficult to think about it, right? If the mind is distracted all the time, then, like now, I'm just forgetting my tea, blah, blah, blah. So if the mind is distracted all the time, then we don't think clearly. So, but if the mind is focused, then if you just meditate for a few minutes, there's much more benefits than meditate for 10, 15 or an hour without being concentrated. Right? So the quality is more important than the quantity. So if you like to meditate or like to do these kind of practices, counting of the breath as an object of concentration. Yeah? So there's two types of meditation. Concentration meditation and analytical meditation. So concentration meaning you focus your mind on one particular object. So one object we can use is the breath, because we have the breath always with us, and the breath also has the power to relax. If the mind is more relaxed, it's more difficult to meditate. If you're too uptight, then better go for a walk. It's not going to work. Or too sleepy, also doesn't work. You need to have a balance, not too dull, or too sleepy, or too active. Like if you wake up in the morning and the mind is deep sleep, for example, and you sit and the mind is not really going. You know the feeling? Yeah? That is dullness. That also doesn't help meditation. It's an obstacle. Then if you take an extremely strong coffee or a few, then the mind goes like this. That's also is distraction. That's also not the real, that's also an obstacle. So we have to have the middle way between not being dull or too relaxed. The mind should be able to analyze. But not too much in the context of a very strong coffee that the mind gets scatters all over the place. Then also we can focus. So that's why we do this concentration on the breath to bring the mind back inwards. Yeah, so most of our minds, especially in modern society, is just busy with what's going on outside. So that's why people don't know what's going on inside in the mind. So very sad that in modern times, if you ask people in a very busy society, always, people, they go to bed with their phone and they wake up with their phone. It's very funny. I still have a Nokia 1200 rupees. phone, so there's not that much there's no internet on it, so it's easy. But if you have a phone with internet and all kind of, all applications, you can be very busy, especially with social media. It's like people. I was in the plane, very nice chaps next to me and stuff, because I couldn't believe how fast this kind of small Apple phone, just able to type messages just like that. So typing on the laptop, you can imagine, but he was doing, and it's so small, the letters are so small, but he was just saying another one. So he is so busy. And most of those things are just going, how are you? Yeah, fine, I'm here, okay. And most of the messages like that, They're very interesting. So then, because of that busyness, people cannot sit still anymore. If you ask people to sit in a room without anything, just a chair, 10, 15 minutes, some people they get crazy. They cannot deal with the mind. They need a distraction. So with one of the researchers, quite a high percentage of people, they asked for electric shock in the leg, small one, to get distracted, because they couldn't deal with the mind. Very simple. So with this concentration on the breath, we help to focus inside. Because without looking inside, we don't really can progress. It's like in the Alps when we were young, we went to holidays in the Alps, in Austria and Switzerland. And then in the early morning in summer, just after sunrise, no wind, the lake is like this, like a mirror. You look in the lake and you see the sky, the mountains, like a mirror. Very peaceful. So if the mind is at peace, very easy to reflect. Very easy to analyze what's going on. But if the mind is disturbed by all kind of gadgets and all kind of things in life, it's like I always compare to the North Sea. We have the North Sea between the country where I'm from, the Netherlands, and England. And once I was on the North Sea, wind force was it 8 to 9 or something. Very frightening. Because our boat was not that big. But it's still quite a big boat in that corner of the building, into that one, maybe a bit bigger even. Yeah. But the waves, they were like 3, 4 stories buildings. Then the boat went here, and then we only saw water. Yeah. Then you go up, and then you look down. It's like it's very scary. And then there's just a small motor, so I thought, I hope we make it to the coast. So that's a disturbance. Nothing reflects in that kind of ocean or sea. So that's, if the mind is busy, we cannot really think properly, and then we cannot reflect. So that's why we do this concentration on the breath, because it brings the mind inward. We cut off all distractions. So that's the first step, kind of self-awareness. Yeah, so we count the breath from 1 to 10, and start over counting, and do it again. Do it for a few minutes. Yeah, every in-breath is 1, out-breath is 2. So we do it for a few minutes. Then the mind is capable of concentrating a bit more than before, if you do it for a long period of time. Yeah. Then you do an analytical meditation. So then, for example, with this, we talk about how does the eye appear? Just recall how a person pointed out your mistakes, or told you were wrong, shouted at you, nasty words, and see how the eye reacted. It was a very concrete concept of So then look at how it appears, and then try to analyze if it appears, if it exists the way it appears, it should be one or different from body and mind. Right? There's no other possibility. So then you analyze. From the tip of your toes to the crown of your head, we cannot really find a concrete on its own side existing I am me. Because all the bones, the different muscles and the organs and everything is just a matter of causality. There's no place for something to exist all by itself. And the same for consciousness. Analyze consciousness from the early morning till the late evening. It's just all kind of thoughts, all these things, perceptions. There's no place for concrete I am me. So within body and mind, you cannot find it. Then you look outside, separate from body and mind, also you cannot find it. Right? Because feel my body, my mind. So there's nothing separate from body and mind, but we can see whether concrete from its own inside exists itself. Right? So then, this ignorance, according to the different types of Buddhist philosophy, has been described in different ways. And so now I give a very general kind of explanation. So if you're interested, you can study tenets. So then the different schools of Buddhist philosophy, they explain how the I appears and explain how it actually doesn't exist, or actually what is the real nature of reality. So that goes maybe too much for this evening, so that we do it maybe another time. Because there's different levels of subtle differences between how what we call the conventional self, because we conventionally exist, right? There's a body, there's a mind. So conventionally, where something we say label, oh, I. So that's mere imputation. Imputation upon the collection of body and mind. We say, oh, my name is Tenzin Namdak. So based on this mere collection of attributes, we label Tenzin Namdak. That's the person. Yeah? So you can do it for yourself. Right? It's not something separate. It's just a mere imputation or labeling based on this collection. You say, oh, we call it this and this. So it's similar true in quantum mechanics and quantum physics. Very similar. It's like there's no concrete subatomic particles to be found that all exist by themselves. Though it appears like this table or the clock or the building appears all so concrete, existing out there. But if you go on a subatomic level, there's nothing concrete to be found. It's just a process of reactions of subatomic particles, nothing else. So it is the same true in quantum mechanics. You know, wherever you look for the electron, at that place you will find it, not somewhere else. So it's very dependent on the person who observes a particular subatomic particle or looking for an electron whatsoever. You know? It depends on the observer as well. So there's dependence. What appears to the person also depends on the person to which it appears. And so that's on that level is very similar. Yeah, what we talk about here, the law of dependent origination and the lack of a concrete entity. And so same in quantum physics, we come to the same conclusion, nothing exists out there all by itself. It's just a matter of the interaction between the different particles that actually causes a particular object to be called water or to be called tea or table. It's a mere label, thank you. They come to the same conclusion, it's a mere imputation based on the collection of these particles and the function it gives. We say, oh, that's a table. It's very similar. Yeah? So that's the true cause of suffering is ignorance. So the true cessation I talked about a little bit. The more you understand emptiness, the more you will understand the possibility to achieve nirvana. Nirvana means the lack or the absence of suffering together with the causes. And so, if you understand, the more you habituate your mind to this understanding of the real, ultimate reality of emptiness, ignorance will lose its potential. The afflictions will lose their potential to become manifest. Same with the dream. You dream something, you wake up, you're still a little bit confused about the reality, so you have to sit down, wash your face, think about it was just a dream. By the power of the logic you use, you counteract that wrong understanding, right? So the more logic you use, the stronger the antidote. Same here with ignorance. The more you understand the ultimate reality of emptiness, ignorance will lose its potential. So that's, if you study the paths like Taita, Gata, Gata, Vara, Gata, Vara, Samgata, Bodhisattva, so on those paths also the spiritual practitioner meditates on emptiness for a long period of time. Then comes out of the meditation, and then if there's direct perception, things appear because of previous inclinations or previous habituations. Things appear through us out there. Actually, the meditator realizes it's like an illusion. You know? So then, things that appear, you don't grasp things as such anymore. If you don't grasp at things as such anymore, you don't make things concrete anymore. There's no adherence to this concrete aspect of reality because you realize it doesn't exist. If that's the case, then what this woman says, it looks like affliction don't arise anymore. Very interesting. So that's what we call true cessation. Yeah, so there's a long process, right? The same when we get angry at a person and practice patience over a long period of time, we'll be capable of slowly getting less angry. Maybe initially it's 1 hour or a day, I don't know, and then it becomes an hour, and then a few months down the line, maybe on 40 minutes, then a few down. If you practice patience, then slowly, less. It's possible to change your mind. That's true. You know, one of my friends, I always use this example, very interesting. We started at the same time studying Buddhism in 1993, many years ago. So he used to be so tight. I mean, Bangalore has traffic jams. In Holland, in the Netherlands, there's also traffic jams. They're a little bit more structured than here. Like today, I was from the airport coming back, was crazy. So in the Netherlands, the traffic jams are structured, but still they're there. So he, especially when it's wet snow and winter, he used to get so tight with the person in front and almost biting in the steering wheel and shouting at the person in front. But the person in front, or a person who just comes in front, you know, just try to be faster than you are and gives you another few seconds of delay, you know. So some people get so frustrated by that, and then they shout at the person. In Holland, you're not allowed to honk, so then you can only shout in your own car, and all the windows are closed because it's cold, and the person in front of you maybe listens to the music, is very pleasant, and doesn't hear you. So he only has himself. Right? So after some time, he realized that it's not very constructive. After many years, and now he said, I just laugh about it. It happens anyway. You cannot change the situation, right? But you can change your mind. So the experience of it can be different. Very interesting. So you can change your mind. So there's different levels of changing that. Yeah? So that's same for emptiness. Yeah? Initially there's a kind of little bit of understanding, and then slowly, the more you progress, the easier it will become to counteract this ignorance. Very interesting. So then it's possible to achieve a cessation or an absence. So this person, my friend, who is not totally free of anger, but at least to a certain extent. So then you can slowly make it less and less until one day it almost disappears. Until a new event happens in your life and there's a new challenge, you know, can also happen. But generally speaking, it's possible, right? So that's, if you try to contemplate reality of emptiness, then even more possibility is there to eliminate the suffering. So that's the cessation. So then the true paths, the fourth noble truth, actually learns us how to do these meditations that we just talked about, yeah? The concentration meditation. And then the analytical meditation, how to analyze this object of ignorance and have to analyze if it exists the way it is or not. Yeah? Or patience, yeah? You focus on the faults of anger for a few minutes without letting your mind getting overpowered. And so if you sit and meditate on patience, try to, and you contemplate the faults of anger or the drawbacks of anger, and then you get uptight, yeah? That's not a good sign. You have to meditate like the scientist, observing a particular object from a neutral perspective, not being biased. From a neutral perspective, you observe what is happening. Yeah? So you see, okay, this person said this to me. What happened? Okay, the first second like that, second like that. Then there was this concrete eye that came up. Then this happened. Then this happened. That's without letting your mind overpower. You observe. You know, like I always use the example: people look in the mobile. In the plane, or you're traveling on a bus, or people in your own family, some people maybe next to you on the bench, looking at a movie in the phone, smartphone. The mind looks like it's in there, you know. It looks like the mind. If you say something, they say they don't say much. You know? Say don't disturb me, and then the mind is in there. So then that person is overpowered by what's going on in there, right? There's no control. But if you look at the person, and you look at the screen, without yourself getting into the movie of the screen, then you observe what's going on. So here, same thing. You observe how, in a particular situation, you got uptight or angry or whatever, and you just observe from neutral perspective. Because if you lose that neutral perspective, you cannot analyze properly anymore. Yeah, so that's the way you do analytical meditation. So you observe and you see the faults or drawbacks of anger and the benefits of practicing patience. And then by the power of your habituation over time, automatically it will transform. So that's kind of the true paths, the very simplified form of true paths, because when you talk about the real true paths, meaning a person who has a direct perception of emptiness, a person who can sit in meditation as long as they work. The wish and the power of the mind is beyond imagination. Yeah? You can. Some people have this calm abiding, so if you have calm abiding, there's no need to depend on food or drink or whatsoever. Yeah? The power of the mind is beyond imagination. So we don't really, most of us don't really understand what's possible. It is possible to have such a kind of strong concentration that you can stay for months without having tea, for example, coffee, or, so that's possible. And then they use this concentration to analyze ultimate reality. And then the mind becomes extremely blissful. It's a very, very kind of pliancy arises of body and mind. So that pliancy of body and mind is a real kind of satisfaction. Not the satisfaction you get from worldly activities, or parties, or drugs. There's no satisfaction in those things. But here, this mind training, especially the meditation on the mind, then if you meet the meditators in the mountains, you can see they don't have much, but they're so content. Why are they content? Because there's a real, genuine form of happiness being experienced. In the beginning of the talk, I said, what is the purpose of life? Is to achieve happiness and not wanting suffering. And what kind of happiness? A stable form of happiness. Happiness, right? Not the one of the masala dosa, or happiness of the pizza, or the lasagna, or whatever you touch to. That's not real happiness. Right? Or watching a movie or something like that. That's not real happiness. The real happiness has to come from within. So there was this great meditator in Dharamshala. He passed away quite some years ago. So then he had all kind of realizations, so his holiness asked, the Dalai Lama asked him to go to the US to do some research, scientists. So he could move energies in the body and many things. So then he was sitting, he had a jet lag still. They put him in this lab and then he had to meditate. Yeah, now you meditate. And then they put all things on. So then, because he had calm abiding, so he can see for 4 hours easily, just without distraction. So, and then moving energies around, so they were quite impressed. But then his comment was, they can only measure physical things. They don't have a clue about the bliss of the mind. Very interesting comment. So, because those meditators, they don't stay up in the mountains because they like hardships. That's not why they stay there. They stay there because there's so much more happiness to be achieved by just, not only being by yourself, but to meditate on the mind. Because what causes us tiredness and suffering is the sense being stimulated. Yeah? So if you have a Sunday morning or something, you have a good night's sleep, you have a free day, you're in your room, you have a not too heavy breakfast, then you read something quietly, the mind's at peace, you know the feeling? Yeah? Then you have to make your lunch. Oh, I forgot this, I have to go to buy something. You go out. I just came to Seabed Road. I used to be there. Close there, stay there. So then, now it's too busy everywhere, and there's money over there, and all the shops. So then just walking, maybe for, let's say, 10, 15, 20 minutes, do shopping, come back. There's no physical exercise. It's just been walking. You're so tired. So why are you so tired? Because of the stimuli of smell, of hearing things, seeing things. that actually disturbs. So it doesn't mean that after this evening you will have to go up to the mountains. Right? That's not the conclusion of the talk. The conclusion of the talk is to see that the real happiness comes from within. So that's a very important point to know. And from meditation, and how to do the meditation. And what is the cause of suffering? And what is the root cause of this suffering? So those things we discussed a little bit today. So that's very precious to at least, if you don't accept this, that's perfectly fine. My job is not to convince you, you have to convince yourself. I only give you material to think about. Then I give some courses sometimes to Westerners. Indians are more easy. Because Indians are more, they have a background of culture, of religion, and faiths, and different forms of mind science, so it's easy to talk about these things. Westerners is more tight. In one way, the way they ask questions is good, but yeah, it takes a little bit more time to talk about these things. Right? They can come to the same conclusions. Yeah, so that's for us very important to understand. Today, that should be the thing we have to take home, analyze, is what is the real cause of suffering? Is this really true? Is it this concrete I or not? And is it true that based on this concrete I, anger, attachment, jealousy, and pride, etc. arises? Then you have to examine yourself. Yeah? So coming here and think, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yes, good, nice. So that does some benefits there, but it's not really helping you. Yeah. So when we talk about Buddhist kind of progress on the path, we have to have what is called the wisdom. 3 types of wisdom. Wisdom that comes from hearing or study. And so like here, we discuss things. So you get a little bit of insight because I talk about it and you hear it. Yeah? So there's the wisdom from hearing, yeah, or studying. The next one is the wisdom of contemplation. What you have heard, you have to analyze or discuss with others and analyze again if it's true or not. And why is it true? Or why is it not true? Those things you have to analyze. So that's contemplation. So same, when you practice patience, first you study. Oh, what is the affliction, anger? What is its nature? What is its function? Maybe you can study it, right? So then, getting that knowledge is the wisdom from hearing. Then you contemplate, okay, is it true? If anger arises like yesterday, it appears like this. And it arose like that. And like this condition appears. In these seconds it becomes stronger because of this reasoning. That's contemplation, right? We just talked about this analytical meditation, right? So this analytical meditation is kind of contemplation. So then you come to a conclusion in that analytical meditation. Oh, it's really true. Anger is only destructive. There's no positive sides towards anger. And practicing patience is only constructive. Only brings benefits. It's true. Then you come to a conclusion, right? Based on different reasonings. So you focus upon that conclusion. So that's the wisdom that arises from meditation. Because the more you come to a conclusion, the more you focus your mind upon that conclusion, it makes very strong kind of imprints or plant seeds in your mind to generate the same kind of thoughts in the future. So that's what is called the wisdom coming from meditation. So that doesn't mean, of course, the more concentration you have, the better, because the more focused our mind is, the better the impact of the meditation, right? If you read a book, same thing. If you read a book and then, oh, something happened outside. Hear something, I see something. Oh, now I have to check this, Then you're not absorbing what you're studying, right? Or reading. But if you put away your mobile and just read and think, concentrate. Then there's more, you absorb much better, Yeah? So that's the 3 wisdoms of hearing, contemplation, and meditation. So those 3 things are very important. So just only getting the knowledge is not enough. We have to make it ourselves, the knowledge. So that making the knowledge ourselves means we have to analyze if it's true or not, contemplate, come to conclusions. Then it becomes an innate part of yourself. And then it becomes real reality. So there's many examples of masters in the past. One famous Geshe, Lam Ramba, he was studying in the monastery, in Mongot. We have a few monasteries here in Palikupa, maybe you know. But there's also in New Hubli. So he was from that area. Then he was studying, I think it was past and future lifetimes or something. Then he told himself, I don't know yet. So he went up in the mountains and through the material, what he studied, and contemplated if it's really true or not. And then he was convinced and went back to the monastery. Very, very good example. And so that's, I don't know, people been to Vaisakha? People have seen the people clapping their hands and jumping around and shouting and joking around. So it's a very interesting form of what we call philosophical debate. A lot of time in the monastic institutions, monasteries and nunneries, in this tradition, which is based on the Nalanda tradition, right? It's not a Tibetan thing. Right? It's all the texts we study, it's all based on the root text of Nalanda scholars. And Nalanda and Vikramashila, Takshila. So, though it is in the Tibetan language, but it's based on the Sanskrit tradition. So, you study those things and you analyze in a very kind of sophisticated, very precise way of discussing. Yeah, so that's what we call the debates, very like epistemology. It's very similar, very, very strong reasoning, very interesting. So in science, we use language mathematics, right, to prove something based on counted back with statistics. It's also based on mathematics. But in this aspect of ultimate reality, it's different from quantum physics. We use also mathematical kind of reasonings. So in this form of epistemology, we just use reasoning. We actually come to very similar conclusions. So that's a very profound system of analyzing, which is very important. So we'll just share. Yeah. So to summarize, the cause of suffering, there were three: the suffering of suffering, then the changing of suffering. Then the all-pervasive compounding form of suffering. There were two aspects, which we saw. Our body just needs a particular condition, and it's very easy to experience suffering. Or within the cycle of samsara, wherever you go, there's this all-pervasive compounding form of suffering. So there's the truth of suffering, and the Buddha said you should know suffering, and referring to the all-pervasive compounding form. Then the Buddha said you should abandon the cause of suffering. Why? Because if you abandon the cause of suffering, there's no suffering. So the cause of suffering, we saw the direct cause of suffering are the afflictions, anger, attachment, jealousy, and pride. The root cause of suffering, so there's a difference, direct cause and root cause. Direct cause are the afflictions. The root cause is this ignorance. Yeah. So then there's the truth of cessation. Then is it possible to achieve a state beyond suffering, or temporarily, or a state of an absence of an affliction, like anger or attachment, jealousy, pride, or ignorance. So there's the truth of cessation, the absence of an affliction. The third noble truth. So the Buddha said you should know suffering, you should abandon the cause of suffering, and you should manifest the true cessation. So for a Buddhist practitioner, the real refuge is not like the statue or the altar. You pray. Why? Because it symbolizes qualities, right? But it's not the real refuge. The real refuge for a Buddhist is this cessation. The real refuge for a Buddhist is the absence of suffering. That's what I like to achieve. Not praying to statue only. Of course, there's benefits, but the real thing we pray for is this state beyond suffering. So that's the true cessation. So the Buddha said, you should manifest the true cessation. Because that we should accomplish. That's the main aim for Buddhist practitioner. And how to do that is the fourth noble truth, is the true paths. So the Buddha said you should meditate on the true paths. Because if we don't meditate on the true paths, we don't accomplish the true cessation. If we don't accomplish the true cessation, we don't eliminate suffering. Yeah, so that's the summary of what the Buddha taught. Yeah, so any questions? I was thinking I give some time. Is there any questions? we can, try to find the answer. Or,
Who is the subject?
huh?
You meditate on the object.
Yeah.
So who is the subject?
What is the subject?
Yeah.
Who is meditating?
That is it.
Yeah. What do you think? It's an easy way out for me. So there, what I said before, there's a conventional self. There's a conventional person, right? Rethinking. There's a consciousness that thinks. There's a body. It's, at the moment, in our present state, there's a dependence on brain, right? The consciousness. Because our consciousness is like chords. So the coarser the consciousness, the more dependence on the brain. So for our ordinary beings, we depend on the brain. So there's form body, physical body, and there's mental activity, or there's kind of consciousness, right? So that on a conventional level exists. So who's meditating? That's what we call a self. It's not a self that exists on its own time, right? Who is meditating is a conventional person who is merely labeled upon the collection of body and mind. So if you call your own name, what's your name? Rosh. Marosh. Marosh. So you think, oh, who's Marosh? It's just a mere label based on the aggregates of your body and mind. When you just came out of the womb of the mother, before your parents thought, oh, we cannot call this Marosh, then it was not Marosh, right? It was just a baby. So then they say, oh, we label this Marosh. Then it came into a being, into existence. But this Marosh, this label, is just merely imputed upon the aggregates. But the aggregates conventionally exist, but also don't exist from their own side. It's like in quantum mechanics, the table exists, the subatomic particles exist, but it's not a concrete something to be found. So that's very simple. Yeah. So these things are not that easy to be understood. So even in quantum mechanics, Feynman, for example, he says, I can honestly say I don't understand quantum mechanics, and I can also say that nobody else does either. So because it's a field that is very complex. Yeah.
Krishnamurti said, observer is the observer.
Yeah.
So object and subject are the same thing. It means
object and subject. No, there's a difference, right? Between an object and a subject. There's a correlation between the two. Right? So the subject, if the mind is a subject, observes a particular object. Right? If the mind examines itself, then still there's one aspect of the mind that is observing, and one aspect of the mind that is being observed. So in that way also there's a difference between object and subject in relation between the two. Because long and short, long depends on short, and short depends on long. Right? So the concept of short depends on what we conceive as long. And the concept of long depends on what we conceive as short. Right? So in similar way, object and subject depends upon each other. Right?
So how did Krishnamurti have said that observer is the observer?
It's the object.
Observer is the observer.
Observer.
Yeah.
The observer is the observer.
Observer is the observer. It's a statement, it's a very famous statement.
Yeah.
The observer is the observer.
Observer that which observes is the observer.
Huh?
So that which observes is the observer.
Yeah. So that's, in one way, there's consciousness, what I said before, that observes something, which we call the observer. Yeah? But actually, it's not consciousness existing by its own side, right? That consciousness apprehending a particular object, on a conventional level, but that consciousness doesn't exist all by itself. So that existing all by itself, that is here what is being refuted. Concreteness or inherent existence without dependence, that doesn't exist. But conventionally there is consciousness, conventionally there is a body and mind, right? Conventionally there is an observer and something to be observed. Right? Yes, helps a bit. Think about it. So what I said before, His Holiness Dalai Lama generated interest in emptiness in his Yeah, before, yeah, maybe in his, last time when he was 16, more or less, 16, 17. So then he starts studying more, because of his interest in the study. Now it's about, what is it, 6 decades, right? 7 decades. So now is when he said, now I slowly think I've started to understand. So that's a person whose mind is a little bit more trained than ours. So then we can, to a certain extent, get some understanding, but the deep understanding is not that easy. Don't have too many expectations. But possible, right? Later on. Slowly, the more you think, the more you study, the more understanding will come to mind. Yeah. It's also very interesting. Another thing is when we have this Mind and Life Institute, it's a kind of as long as I think 2 decades ago or something. Verla, he passed away 2 years ago, a neuroscientist. So he put on this kind of institute to build the bridge between science and Buddhist mind science, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology. Very interesting. So then there's all these meetings, sometimes happens every year, and then a lot of world-leading scientists, they come. Very interesting. Like David Richardson, for example, Richard Davidson, for example, world-leading person when it comes to neuroscience and the field of the effects of the mind for meditation upon brain activity, etc. So there's many world-leading scientists who come to these kind of conferences. So there was once a few scientists, I think it was Dharamsala, I'm not sure, who came and they were a bit skeptical. Why not? So then a lot of people who went before, he said, well, you wait. When you meet His Holiness, his questions are very sharp and very direct. He thinks about things because we sometimes stuck in a particular field, he thinks beyond the borders. So he will ask you questions you might find difficult to answer. Be prepared. And the scientist thought, no way, no way. So he went there, and then His Holiness very, very sharp. Many questions. And then people change. Then I asked the question, Your Holiness, how long actually are you studying these matters? Then His Holiness said, joking around a bit, for the last 14 lifetimes. So that means that the mind is trained over a long period of time. So especially when it comes to emptiness, it's nothing that can be realized just like that. Yeah, it takes time.
It is true that, do you believe that the space-time is arising out of the mind activity?
Space-time comes from mind.
Yeah.
It's depending on mind, right? Because matter is not cause. So we define, for example, a substantial cause and corporate conditions for a phenomenon to come about. Okay? So space-time or particles, it depends on mind. It is not caused. Mind is not a substantial cause for matter. Also, the stream of matter has a substantial cause without beginning. And so we have the Big Bang, but also the Big Bang was caused. And beyond the Big Bang, there's also other forms of continuity of matter, right? So we have to define that there's substantial causes and corporate conditions. And it's a very complex process of mind and matter, right? So if you have a computer model, the more variables you put inside, the more complex it becomes, right? So out there, and that connected with the minds in the beginning of lifetime, is a very complex kind of phenomena. It's not easy to be explained. At least to a certain extent, we can understand certain laws of mind and matter and the relationship between the two.
Sir, we go in the meditation. He said that the space-time both disappears.
Space-time disappears?
Yeah, in meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you come back, then again space-time arises because you look around.
Yeah. Okay. So when you meditate, it's not space-time disappears. From the point of view of your experience, it looks like it disappears. Because out there, space-time still exists. It's not that it disappears and comes back. It's just it looks like. Okay. Yeah? One more question? Yeah?
Yes, so I'm actually kind of person like not completely available for meditation and practicing these dharmas and all. So I'm also now living normal life, like working and then so kind of busy schedule.
Yeah.
And also even though working, I'm also doing some personal interest also. So how I can accommodate these practices. So today I'm starting. Yes. What is the first type? Actually, I'm already started doing meditation in a day, in the morning. But throughout the day, what are the different practices I can accommodate? Like mantras, sutras, and prayers. So what are the different practices?
The main thing, mantras, sutras, all good. But the main thing is these essential meditations we just talked about, right? So the concentration meditation, analytical meditation, because that's going to change the mind. So then whatever time you have during the day, best of course in the morning, before all the business of the day starts, just find some time every morning. It's better to have just like 10-15 minutes every morning than one weekend, like a whole weekend, and then a few weeks nothing, and then that's not very constructive. Sometimes we get very excited and things, and then we do a lot, but then we forget about it because we don't see progress that quickly, and then we forget it. But actually, the progress is there, just we don't see it. Like learning a language, right? You learn a language, if you meet a person after a few months, they see, oh, you progressed. But actually, it goes yourself very slow, so it looks like there's no progress. So it's better to do every day a little bit, 15 minutes a day. And then mainly the concentration meditation and analytical meditation. Right? That's for the secular aspect of Buddhism, and later on, if you're more inclined or like to do something, how things can be done. Yeah? Then one more maybe, otherwise stop. Yeah?
How do we initiate the process of unthinking and enhance the joy of breathing?
The joy of?
Breathing.
Breathing. So, one aspect, if you breathe, it relaxes. Right? Sometimes you have a problem in life, deep breath and it helps. No? So that's why if you count the breath, but the thing here is not just breathing and you try to relax, because of course it relaxes, but it's not very constructive. So then it's better to count breath, focus upon that object. So that has a relaxation, but also a very constructive thing to build up more concentration, which you use in analytical meditation. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding regarding mindfulness meditation, and people know talks and think that that's meditation, but that doesn't really bring much benefit, other than just temporary relaxation. Right? So that's why counting of the breath is very, what I just explained, is a very constructive way of not only relaxing, but also building to a very, like a plan, right? Generate more concentration. Why? To be able to concentrate better. Why? In order to do an analytical meditation better. Why? To analyze things, to change the mind. Yeah?
What about initiating the process of unthinking?
Non-thinking?
Unthinking.
Unthinking.
Yeah, flush away all the
Yeah,
thoughts.
flush away all the thoughts. Yeah. It's temporary relief, right? But it's not going to eliminate. It's like if you go away, escape a problem. For example, you don't like this person, alright? So you go there, but then you meet a similar person. It's like the whole world is covered into thorns. Yeah, Shantideva says. So you can do two things. You can cover the whole world with leather, or to hurt your feet, or you cover your feet. What's easier? So if you train your mind, then it doesn't matter who you meet. You can deal with it. So the same here. Non-thought is just a temporary. Sometimes that people need to do that because, like my friends met from Chandika, right? Their mind is so occupied with all these things. They can't meditate. They first have to relax, do some exercise, or go for a walk, or try to let the thoughts go. That's then helpful. But it's not the real tool for happiness. It's just a temporary thing to. It's the first step. It's not the main meditation. So that's the first step. Then your concentration. Then you do analytical meditation. Then the mind starts to change. Yeah. Yeah. Stop. Yeah, one more.
Analytical is same as vipassana?
Say again?
Analytical is same as vipassana?
Certain aspects, yeah. Vipassana, it's like insight meditation, right? So, but there's so many traditions, so you have to be precise and see what the differences are, right? Because there are differences. Also within the Buddhist doctrine, there's different traditions who present things in different ways because of different disciples and different circumstances. So there's different interpretations, right? Also within one tradition, you will see there's different interpretations possible. Right? So yeah, it's kind of insight meditation, right? So it can be aspect of analyzing things of reality. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So then we dedicate. So yeah, what the Buddha taught, we talked about, and also I said that it's important to have kind of good motivation. Then we talk about things. And here today is very precious because on this Buddha Purnima, we actually went in a very summary though with the whole Buddhist teaching. Especially we talked a lot about the real cause of suffering and how to eliminate that. So that's very fortunate. Yeah? So try to direct the kind of positive potential or virtue or yeah. So try to pray that oneself and all sentient beings without exception may always be in contact with this kind of understanding of reality, and may they also generate the real understanding and the realizations of this reality. Yeah? Try to pray. And then think that oneself and all sentient beings may also generate qualities of mind, the constructive emotions like compassion, loving kindness, yeah? Or the chitta, wish for liberation, etc. So try to dedicate for that as well. Then all sentient beings to progress in the state of path to enlightenment as quickly as possible, yeah, and always meet the right qualified teachers in all their lifetimes to come and achieve the state of nirvana and enlightenment. A long life for precious gurus, particularly Holy Dalai Lama, benefit of world peace and harmony amongst different forms of faith and religions, and even also to enlighten as quickly as possible. Then maybe we read the dedication prayer on page number 32. 32 prayer book. Yeah, middle of the page. May all beings everywhere, marked by suffering of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of their merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or even fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds, and may those whose words are wrong at all be restored and find response. May the naked find clothing, may the hungry find food, and may the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, and those weak find joy. May the corners find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timeless rains and bountiful harvests, and may all medicines be effective, and also pray for good fruits. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments, whatever diseases there are in the world, they never cure king. May the friends cease to be afraid, and those who bound be freed, and may powerless people find power, and people think of benefiting themselves. For as long as space remains, and as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the misery of the world. Thank you very much. Hope you have some benefit. Thank you.